And I'm like, bruh, like everyone needs to chill out because we do not have the authority to condemn anybody. We don't have the authority to tell people whether or not they're going to hell. That's God's job. Our job is simply to love other people. What's up? It's Johanna with God is Glamorous, where we learn how to live our best lives through Jesus Christ. And today we're going to be talking about judgment and why Christians are so judgmental, and even if we have the right to judge others. If you've ever wondered about this, definitely stay tuned because we have a lot to talk about. So, I recently posted a video the other day about having the fruits of the Spirit. And it was this funny Pink Panther music where it was like da-da-da-da-da, this kind of music. And I was kind of giving the side eye, and I said, when people say they're Christians but their fruit says otherwise. And it was supposed to be funny, and I went into details about having the fruit of the Spirit. So ultimately, I thought the video was really funny, and it was supposed to be very informative. But a lot of people came into the comments, and either, number one, they thought I was judging, or number two, they ended up being the judges themselves. So one person wrote, let me read the comment that she wrote. So one person wrote this to me. She says, okay, well, you're doing the same thing. You're condemning. It's irritating that Christians are always trying to point out other people's faults when they should be broadcasting the redemptive qualities of God. I thought that was true. To my response, I was like, hey girl, totally agree with what you're saying. I am not judging. I understand that I'm a sinner. I sin every day. Just because I think I have the fruit of the Spirit doesn't mean that I get impatient or angry sometimes. I'm still human. And I was like, girl, I totally agree. Wasn't judging. This was simply a post to inform. Another person goes into the comments and says, they are either a narcissist or a Jezebel. To my response, I was like, yeah, that's not true. And I think Christians are so quick to label people as having a Jezebel spirit, or that they need to repent, or if they don't do this, they're going to go to hell. And I'm like, bruh, like everyone needs to chill out because we do not have the authority to condemn anybody. We don't have the authority to tell people whether or not they're going to hell. That's God's job. Our job is simply to love other people. So I'm going to go over a few reasons why we should not judge people, and what are the differences between judging someone and simply correcting or teaching someone. So let's get started. All right, so the first example takes place in the book of 1 Samuel. There is a woman, her name is Hannah, and she is desperate to have a baby. She wants to have a baby, but it says specifically that God closed her womb. So Hannah is just praying to God, asking God for a baby. So she goes to God and she begins praying, and we see Eli, who is a high priest in Israel, and it specifically says that although her lips were moving, no words were coming out. So Eli thought she was drunk. So check this out. So it says, Hannah was praying in her heart and her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. Eli thought she was drunk. Then it says, and he said to her, how long are you going to stay drunk? Put away your wine. And then Hannah says, not so, my Lord. Hannah replied, I am a woman who is deeply troubled. I have not been drinking wine or beer. I was pouring out my soul to the Lord. So a lot of the times we can be like Eli if we're judging. So a lot of the time when people judge, most often they are putting the wrong impression on someone, just like Eli did, the high priest of Israel. He looked at this woman and he's like, girl, put away your wine, you're drunk. And she's like, no, I'm not, I'm actually praying. And that could happen to us if we judge. We could judge wrongly and end up looking very stupid, all right? So if you see someone and they may look like they're drunk, or they may look like they are a prostitute, or they may look like they're a drug dealer, or just because they have a lot of tattoos, you may think that they're in a gang, just stop. Like, stop judging people because you don't know what their background is. You don't know where they've been. You don't know their heart. It says in 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 7, that people look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. So Before you think about casting judgment on people, just realize that you shouldn't do it. It's not your place to judge. And instead of formulating an opinion on them, which may be false anyway, just take the time to pray for them or ask them if there's anything that you can do to help. Because ultimately, God does not call us to judge or condemn people. He calls us to love one another. So that's what we should do above anything else. All right, the second reason why we should not judge is because we are sinners ourselves. We have sinned. We are sinners. We sin every day. So there's no reason why we should be able to look at the next person and say, oh, they're wrong, because we have sin on our hands too. So let's take a look at the woman caught in adultery in John chapter 8. So this is a very popular story. If you don't know the backstory, there's a woman caught in adultery, and the Pharisees go to Jesus, so they legit catch her in the act of having sex with another man. So they bring this woman to Jesus, and they're like, Jesus, what do we do? Because the law of Moses states that we should stone her. And they were trying to trip Jesus up, but Jesus comes with another answer that pretty much shuts everything down. So it says, teacher, they said to Jesus, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say? So it says they kept demanding an answer. So Jesus stood up again and said, all right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. Then he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. So they're like, yo, Jesus, look, this woman was caught in adultery. The law of Moses specifically states that she needs to be stoned to death. What do you think? And Jesus was like, all right, bet. Well, whoever is without sin, you throw the first stone. And then Jesus starts writing something in the sand. And the Bible isn't clear about what he writes, but people often speculate that Jesus was writing the sins of all the Pharisees. So when they see Jesus writing in the sand again, they legit back away and they leave, starting with the oldest from the youngest. And I think this is very profound because a lot of people are just like the Pharisees, and they think that they are holier than thou and everyone is wrong except them. But Jesus shut that down and said, hey, whoever is without sin, you cast the first stone. And when they saw what Jesus was writing in the dust, they were like, all right, I'm gonna leave because I'm no better than her. Even though we may have a strong relationship with God, even though we may walk with God daily and read our Bibles, or you may speak in tongues, who cares? You still sin. You're still a sinner. We all are. So it's never our place to judge or cast judgment on them because we are sinners ourselves. And the last reason why we should be careful about judging someone is because most of the time we have bigger problems that we're facing. So in Matthew chapter 7, verse 1 through 5, Jesus is talking about judging, and he says, do not judge, because if you judge someone, you will be judged with the same measure in which you judge them. So it says, judge not that you may not be judged. For with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. And he says, why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? He says, or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when there's a log in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your own brother's eye. So Jesus goes in and says, first of all, you cannot tell your brother or your sister or your family or whoever that they have a speck in their own eye when you legit have a huge log in your own eye. And he says, you hypocrite, first take whatever is out of your own eye, take the big log out of your own eye, so that you can tell your brother or your sister that there's a tiny speck in their own eye. So what this goes to show us is the fact that before we point fingers at the next person, we need to look at ourselves and realize that we don't have it all together. And before we can cast judgment on someone else, we have to look at ourselves and we have to fix the problems within our own heart first. So you may be saying, well, all right, I'm not judging, but there are some times where you have to correct other people. And I 100% agree. There are times when you should correct people, but there's a difference between correcting someone and judging someone. So let me give you some tips on how you can come from a place of correction rather than judgment. And the first thing that you need to be aware of is the fact that if you cannot say it directly to someone's face, then don't say it. If you have to hide behind a computer, if you have to hide behind a fake profile, then you should not be saying it, period. Also, if you cannot say it in a loving way, don't say it. It's going to come off wrong, and it's not going to come from a place in which the other person can receive it. So make sure that you're coming from a place of love and understanding, and that you genuinely want to help the other person before you say anything. And lastly, if you can't say it from a place of relatability, don't say it. If you have no intention on trying to understand the other person, don't say it. If you can't say, hey girl, I totally been where you are, I understand exactly where you're coming from, but this is wrong. Or if you can't say, hey, I understand why you did this, I understand that this is hard, but we can't do this anymore. So always remember that you have to come from a place that is loving. You have to come from a place where they can clearly see your true identity. And lastly, you want to make sure that you are coming from a place of understanding and that you can relate to the other person, because how can you tell someone what they're doing wrong if you've never been in that situation, or if you can't come from a place of relatability? So ultimately, what I'm trying to tell as Christians is that we should not judge, because number one, we may get it wrong, just like Eli did. Number two, we also are sinners and we are no better than the next person. And number three, we most likely have more problems than the other person that we're trying to tell about themselves. So the first thing that you should do when you feel that you should say something and to correct someone else is to pray for wisdom. Pray for wisdom about when you should speak, how you should say something, or if you should say something at all. The second thing before you decide to judge someone or tell someone about themselves is to recognize your own faults. Don't come from a place where you feel as though you're holier than thou, because we're not. We are all sinners. We have all fallen short, and we are not on a specific platform. We are not on a higher platform than our brothers or sisters. So always remember that. And lastly, before you feel like you should judge someone, pray for them first. Pray and ask God to soften their heart. Pray and ask God to give them the revelation that they need in order to realize that what they're doing is wrong. And I think that's where we should come from, a place of love and understanding. And for us to always remember that we're no better than the next person. We are all sinners. We're all in the same boat. And we're just all trying to just get to heaven. And we're all just trying to get to heaven and bring as many souls with us as possible. So I hope this video has helped you. Let me know if you have any questions about judgment, or whether or not you should say something to someone, or whether you're having a hard time receiving criticism from the next person. So I look forward to hearing from you. Please be sure to check out any of these videos here, and be sure to subscribe as well. And I will see you in the next video. Stay glamorous.